Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 215 of the podcast. And on this episode of the podcast, I am talking about the Carolina Panthers quarterback competition between Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. In what feels like the saddest quarterback competition in the NFL, two former highly touted first-round draft picks in Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold will compete to be the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. Let's start by talking about Baker Mayfield, who was the number one overall draft pick by the Cleveland Browns in the 2018 draft, and in his first year was a huge success, breaking the record for most touchdowns thrown by a rookie QB with 27. But in his sophomore season, Mayfield led the league with 21 interceptions and then kind of bounced back in his third season when he went 11-5 and won a postseason game. But most people would give all of that credit to the Cleveland Browns running backs, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And expectations for the Cleveland Browns the last few years have been sky high because they had Baker Mayfield and then they gave him Odell Beckham Jr., one of the most talented receivers in the history of football, and Jarvis Landry, one of the most dependable receivers in football. The Browns were supposed to be the next it team. They had the star quarterback that they've been searching for. They had the star receivers, but sadly Baker Mayfield never became that star quarterback we all thought he would become. And now the Browns have replaced him with the now problematic Deshaun Watson in what has been the most controversial move of the NFL offseason. Deshaun Watson has a fully guaranteed massive contract while they move on from Baker Mayfield. In 4 seasons with the Cleveland Browns, Baker Mayfield has 92 touchdown passes and 56 interceptions and close to a 62 completion percentage. The real issue with Baker Mayfield is he's an average quarterback. He's nothing special, and in today's NFL, you kind of have to be a franchise quarterback because their salaries are skyrocketing by the year. If the Browns could have given Mayfield between 10 and 15 million a year to be their starting quarterback, I think they would have kept him. The problem is the market dictates you have to give him 25 to 30 million, and you can't justify those numbers for a middle of the pack kind of guy. The Bengals paid a guy like Andy Dalton and they didn't go anywhere with it because Andy Dalton was just an average quarterback. He was good. He could win you games, but he was not the reason your team was going to be good. Now they have a guy in Joe Burrow who is that type of guy. So in the future, the Bengals will probably be better off paying a guy like Joe Burrow because he has that it factor. The sad thing about Baker Mayfield is he doesn't have that it factor. I cannot justify giving him $20 million to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, and his reputation says you have to give him that because they drafted him number 1 overall, and there's all these average quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins getting that kind of ridiculous money. And I do think Kirk Cousins is a bit better than Baker Mayfield, but that's the type of quarterback that Baker Mayfield is. He's an average kind of guy like a Kirk Cousins. And those type of guys don't win Super Bowls unless the team around them is all-time great. And the Cleveland Browns are not that. They need a star-level quarterback to be able to compete with the other teams. Baker Mayfield, for me, is closer to Mitch Trubisky than he is to Patrick Mahomes, and that's the problem. He could be a starting quarterback in the NFL. If your team is great, he could probably win a Super Bowl if the team around him is all-time great. But if you are asking Baker Mayfield to carry your franchise, I think it's going to end really badly. And that's exactly what happened with Cleveland. Baker was never going to become a 35 to 40 touchdown passes a year type of guy. My own personal gripe towards Baker Mayfield is the celebrity aspect of him. He needs and desires to be in a ridiculous amount of commercials. And that's all well and good when you're Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. But when you're still unproven in the league, I don't think you should be seeking that type of fame. It makes you a target when you do struggle. Like it or not, Baker Mayfield now has some baggage towards his career, and the only way he can make it go away is playing elite level quarterback, and I don't think that's going to happen. So he's kind of in this no-win situation. That gets us to Sam Darnold, who was drafted 3rd overall by the Jets in 2018, and in 3 seasons with the Jets threw 45 touchdowns and 39 interceptions. Darnold has yet to throw 20 touchdown passes in a season. His career high is 19, and many people like myself thought Darnold's biggest problem was he was on the New York Jets, one of the worst run organizations in the history of football. And when he was traded to the Panthers, we were all excited to see who the real Sam Darnold was. And I was excited, but then he ended up doing the exact same thing. In his first year with the Panthers, he threw 9 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. Now, the Panthers are not a great team either, but I just thought getting out of New York, Darnold would put up some numbers, like some 25 touchdown type of numbers, and he did not do that. He was still below average. Mayfield has at least been an average NFL quarterback. He has at times looked like a starting quarterback. Sam Darnold has not looked like that. I remember the infamous game against the Patriots when Darnold said he was seeing ghosts. I thought that was super embarrassing, and I thought going to the Panthers would change all that. Like, I thought he was going to get a fresh start and throw like 30 touchdowns with the Panthers. He looked even worse as a member of the Carolina Panthers. I will say the big difference between Darnold and Mayfield is Mayfield has at least been surrounded by some talent. I mean, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr. Sam Darnold has never played with an elite wide receiver. The New York Jets gave him an aging running back in Le'Veon Bell and said, here, go win some games with this guy. And then with the Panthers, he had an injured Christian McCaffrey. Like, that was never going to work out. So I would love to see Sam Darnold play with a great wide receiver like a Devontae Adams type of guy, but that has not happened, and my fear is that will never happen to Sam Darnold because he's not likely going to get a third chance to be a starting quarterback in the National Football League. You don't get third chances. You barely even get second chances in today's NFL. When I think about both of these guys, I think about how the league values quarterbacks way too much, because look at the Jets. They looked at a guy like Sam Darnold and they thought he was going to fix every single problem they had, and they didn't surround him with talent. The guys who do the best are the ones who have talent around them. Like the Patriots last season spent a bunch of money in the offseason. They gave Mac Jones a tight end and Hunter Henry, and then he was able to have success as a rookie. Look at a guy like Trevor Lawrence with the Jaguars. The Jaguars did absolutely nothing last offseason to surround Trevor Lawrence with the right amount of talent. Not to mention he had Urban Meyer as his head coach. I mean, that was a complete and utter disaster, but they did not surround Trevor Lawrence with a great wide receiver and great players to throw the ball to. So he struggled. It's not a coincidence that the guy who had the best rookie season of any quarterback last year was surrounded by NFL caliber talent. I think there are way too many NFL teams that think the quarterback is going to solve all of their issues, and that's how I think the Jets viewed Sam Darnold. They thought he was going to be the savior of their organization, that they were finally going to have their franchise level quarterback. The truth is, you have to surround that player with talent to see if he is a franchise quarterback. That's why I love what the Miami Dolphins are doing with Tua Tagovailoa. They are surrounding him with a lot of talent. They brought in Tyreek Hill. We are now going to get the answer once and for all. Is Tua a franchise quarterback? The Dolphins are letting us all figure that out in real time. We are going to get a straight answer. Is this guy capable of being a franchise quarterback for the Dolphins for the next 5 to 10 years? The Jets never gave Sam Darnold a chance, or us a chance, to see, is he really a franchise quarterback? And part of me thinks his struggles with the Carolina Panthers are residual issues from being a member of the New York Jets. They possibly ruined his career before it could get get going. Talking about Baker Mayfield, I mean, we all have our opinions on Baker because he's been surrounded by talent and he wasn't able to get the job done. They gave him Odell Beckham Jr. and for whatever reason that didn't really work. They gave him Jarvis Landry, that didn't really work. The Cleveland Browns were a really good football team when they went 11-5 because they had an elite running game. It wasn't because of Baker Mayfield. So because of that reason, a lot of us think this guy is not a franchise quarterback. He was given the chance to be one. My point is, I don't think Sam Darnold was ever given a real chance to be a franchise quarterback. And I feel like a majority of the young quarterbacks who are drafted in the first rounds are not given that chance because they are just asked to be the savior of these really bad teams like the Jaguars. I mean, there's a real chance that doesn't work out for Trevor Lawrence because the Jaguars are the Jaguars. It has absolutely nothing to do with Trevor Lawrence. The team you are the quarterback of matters now more than ever. It is a pass-first league, and I think that's Baker Mayfield's biggest issue, is he never had great success even though he was given great receivers. The Browns and Jets both moved on from Mayfield and Darnold respectively, and this is a newer thing in the NFL. Teams moving on from high first-round quarterbacks quicker than ever before. In the past, the Browns and Jets would have held on to Mayfield and Darnold and given them a chance after chance to make it work because of the cachet of being a first-round draft pick. That doesn't exist now. Teams move on quickly. The Cardinals got rid of Josh Rosen and drafted Kyler Murray. The Jets move on from Darnold and immediately draft Zach Wilson. I mean, in the past, these teams would have fired numerous head coaches before replacing these young franchise quarterbacks. The idea of giving people time isn't there anymore in the NFL. You are not given time. You are either really good by year 2 or we are probably going to move on from you in the next year or 2. There's no more 5-year windows to see if you're a great quarterback. You need to show that you are great now. And stats really have become everything when it comes to the quarterback position. I don't think these teams want to pay a guy $30 to $35 million a year if you're not putting up 30 to 35 touchdowns a year. I mean, look at the Rams. They paid Jared Goff and then they got rid of him because he didn't develop into that guy who could throw 30 to 35 touchdowns a year. Then they bring in Matthew Stafford and immediately win a Super Bowl. I think teams are now looking for their version of Matthew Stafford. And if they have guys like Baker Mayfield, they're willing to move on from them because they think, oh, if I bring in Deshaun Watson, I can win a Super Bowl. If I get rid of Sam Darnold and Zach Wilson becomes a 30 touchdown type of guy, then I can compete for a Super Bowl. And if that guy doesn't become that guy, I just keep moving on until I find my version of that guy. Job security for an NFL quarterback is at an all-time low. And the perfect example of this is Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz was almost an MVP winning quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. Then the Eagles win the Super Bowl with Nick Foles because Wentz was injured. Then Wentz became an average to above average guy with the Eagles. Then he was traded to the Colts. He had a 29 touchdown season with the Colts. They lose an embarrassing last game to the Jacksonville Jaguars, miss out on the postseason, and the Colts immediately move on from him and bring in Matt Ryan because the Colts are just trying to win with whoever is going to be the best quarterback. They had Phillip Rivers, then they had Carson Wentz, now they have Matt Ryan. They are just going through the carousel of quarterbacks until they find the one who becomes elite and becomes their franchise quarterback. And that's all because Andrew Luck retired. I mean, he was their franchise quarterback. That's what happens when you lose out on one. You go through a bunch of them until you find the next franchise guy. And it wasn't Carson Wentz, it wasn't Phillip Rivers, and it's not going to be Matt Ryan. And the Panthers have put themselves in the exact same situation. They had Cam Newton for about a decade. He won an MVP. He brought them to a Super Bowl. Then he struggled at the end. They moved on from him. And what have they done since? They brought in average to below average guys. Teddy Bridgewater, who I'm not a big fan of. I get it. All he does is bring a good completion percentage. He doesn't win football games. Then you have Sam Darnold, who wasn't very good last season. And now you have Baker Mayfield, who I think is an average quarterback quarterback who can maybe win 8 games with this version of the Carolina Panthers? Panther fans are not very excited about this team because they don't have that franchise guy. I mean, the Broncos brought in Russell Wilson, and now everyone thinks Denver is a legitimate Super Bowl contender because it all comes down to, do you have an elite quarterback? And if you do, you are a Super Bowl contender. If you don't, you are average and probably irrelevant. I think in the past we were probably more forgiving for average quarterbacks. Like, I look back at a guy like Alex Smith. Alex Smith was a really good quarterback, and if he was given a really good team, he could bring them to the Super Bowl. But Alex Smith was not a franchise guy who was going to throw 40 touchdowns a season. But we all liked Alex Smith. You could win with Alex Smith. I feel like the league doesn't have those type of guys anymore because those type of guys are not being given a chance to be a long-term starting quarterback. The guys who are the long-term starting quarterbacks are the Patrick Mahomeses of the world, the Josh Allens of the world, these otherworldly talents that these average guys just can't compete against. That's why, as a Patriots fan myself, I'm so curious to see what Mac Jones is going to become, because I know if he doesn't become that otherworldly elite talent, the Patriots probably aren't going to be Super Bowl contending team. I mean, they had Tom Brady for the longest time. They won 6 Super Bowls with the man. Now they have maybe an average quarterback, and that's scary in this environment, because if he is average and going up against the Josh Allens of the world, then what happened in the postseason when the Bills destroyed the Patriots is going to continue to happen. This is how I see things shaking out in Carolina. Baker Mayfield is going to win the job. You don't trade for him and then not give him a chance to start. And if he's bad early on, they'll go to Sam Darnold. But let's not pretend that's good news for the Carolina Panthers. I truly believe the worst place to be in the NFL is a team with an average to below average quarterback. What's the absolute best case scenario for the Panthers? They win 8 to 9 games. Baker Mayfield throws 25 touchdowns. I think that is the absolute best case scenario. There is no world where I see Baker Mayfield leading the Carolina Panthers to the postseason, and that's because they have a lack of talent, and they have a coach I really don't believe in Matt Rule. He's not in a great situation, but he didn't even do good when he was in one, so why would I believe in him now? I don't think there could be a football fan on planet Earth who thinks Baker Mayfield is going to have a great season with the Carolina Panthers. This is probably not going to work out for Baker. In fact, these two quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, are on the brink of being bust. And for the Browns and Jets, they are bust. When you pick a quarterback that high in the first round and they don't last at least 6 years with the team, it's a complete and utter failure. And I get it. The Browns and Jets deserve a lot of the blame. These are not well-run teams. Still, these guys have not lived up to the hype placed upon them. And in the next few years, I wouldn't be surprised if both become backups or even out of the league in 5 years. Their futures are both up in the air. And whoever ends up winning the starting quarterback job for the Panthers is not the next franchise quarterback. He is just a placeholder for the next guy they find to be their franchise quarterback. This is my final thought on Baker Mayfield. I look at Baker Mayfield and I look at him like Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is good right now because he is on the Tennessee Titans, who have a really good running game and have surrounded him with talent. He has Mike Vrabel. That's the type of team I think Baker Mayfield could end up winning with. That type of team that has an elite running game like he had with the Browns and an elite head coach. The problem is those teams no longer want to invest in those type of guys. In fact, I think right now the Tennessee Titans would love to move on from Ryan Tannehill and get themselves a quarterback like a Josh Allen type, because that team hasn't won a Super Bowl because they don't have a franchise quarterback capable of leading their team to the postseason. Ryan Tannehill has played really badly in the postseason for the Tennessee Titans and is probably one of the reasons they have not yet gone to a Super Bowl or even won the thing. This is Mayfield's last chance to be a starting quarterback in the NFL, and I think Sam Darnold already got his last chance. Again, if Baker Mayfield really does come out of the gate struggling badly for the Panthers, then Darnold would obviously come in. I still think there's a small chance Sam Darnold isn't even the backup quarterback quarterback when Baker Mayfield wins the job. Like, I could see the Panthers moving on from Sam Darnold and getting a guy who is a backup quarterback, because I don't think you want to have that Baker Mayfield struggling, let's bring in Sam Darnold dynamic. I don't think that's very good for the team. You either have one quarterback or you have zero. I don't think quarterback competitions are good for an NFL team, especially in today's world where everyone has a star franchise quarterback. Sadly, I just don't believe in either player moving forward, Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold. They're just average to below average quarterbacks. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.